that they could only have been written under the direction of an omniscient deity. An atheist is simply someone who has considered this claim, read the books, and found the claim to be ridiculous. There is nothing that needs to be presupposed on insufficient evidence in order to reject the biblical God. I mean, what dogma have we all embraced to not take Zeus and Poseidon and Apollo into account on a daily basis? What dogma have we used to reject all of the thousands of dead gods who now lie buried in that mass grave we call mythology? Would it be dogmatic to doubt that the Iliad or the Odyssey was written by the creator of the universe? This is not dogmatism. As Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That is all you need for atheism. If ever there were an antidote to dogmatism, that's it. There's a related claim, the idea that atheism is arrogant, and science generally is arrogant in its dismissal of religion. This is really ironic. It's this claim reverberates ceaselessly in the echo chamber of American religious discourse. But it is a profound irony to see religious people praising themselves for their humility while essentially making claims about cosmology and physics and astronomy and geology and biology and paleontology and just dozens of specific sciences that no scientist could make. I mean, every religious person who takes the Genesis account of creation, say, seriously, 53% of Americans seemingly take it literally, but just even dignifying it as informative. Any person who's doing this is essentially saying to somebody like Stephen Hawking, Stephen, you're a smart guy. I see you got a lot of equations over there, but you essentially don't know enough about cosmology, because here, God did this in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh, and I don't really, it could be a metaphor, but I don't see you really grappling with the nuances here, and they're essentially saying to someone like Richard Dawkins or Robert Trivers or any evolutionary biologist, they're saying, you're saying all this stuff about DNA and the fossil record and radiocarbon dating, but it says here that man was made in a separate act of creation, and that really we should ponder over that. And this would be amusing, this kind of covert arrogance, if it were not having such a disastrous effect, if it were not impeding the teaching of science in this country. 30% of biology teachers don't even mention evolution because it is such a hassle to deal with the religious lunacy of their students and their parents. This really is impeding medical research. It really is eroding the prestige of the United States in the eyes of the rest of the world. You saw this recent Republican debate. When asked, how many of you reject evolution? 3 arms go up. This is flabbergasting. These people are seeking the highest office, not only the highest office in the land, they're seeking more power and responsibility than any person has had in human history. So to wrap up, let me just say that none of what I've just said should be construed as a denial of the importance of ethics in our lives, or even the importance of spiritual experience. You can be someone who's deeply committed to transforming your moment-to-moment perception of the world and use techniques like meditation and fasting, and you can go into a cave for a year and be a mystic if you want to. None of that requires presupposing anything on insufficient evidence, and none of that requires that we lie to ourselves or to our children about our state of knowledge about the world. And the problem I have with religion, both at every point on the spectrum, from moderate to extreme, is that it stands as a permanent denial of the possibility of developing a truly rational, modern, open-ended discussion about the nature of our subjectivity, about the possibility of ethics and spirituality truly in conformity with our rationality as it exists now. Every religious person, every person who's committed to still being a Christian or a Jew or a Buddhist is essentially giving tacit endorsement to the religious divisions in our world and essentially saying that we need some measure of mythology, we need some measure of fairy tale, we need to pretend on some occasions that we know things we do not know. And it's simply untrue. So I think that's probably enough to get us started. Thank you. I'm going to go up there with the podium. Well, let me give you a sense of what it's like to be me having this conversation. I mean, it seems to me we could have been having this conversation 500 years ago. And life was difficult 500 years ago. There was a lot of despair. There were crops failed and disease spread and people suffered just instantaneous and catastrophic changes in their fortune. And it was the cause of all of this actually was well understood 500 years ago. It was witchcraft. And happily, the church had produced some very energetic men who had the gumption to deal with this problem. And so every year, some hundreds and sometimes thousands of women were burned alive for casting spells on their neighbors. Now, imagine what it would be like to be among the 5 or the 10% of people at most who recognize that the very belief in magic, the very belief in witchcraft, the very belief in good witches or bad witches was a malignant fantasy. That the white witches who were helping people with medicinal herbs and practicing midwifery, they were on no firmer ground than the black witches who were casting the evil eye. The whole belief system was at fault. Imagine the kind of criticism you're going to get. No, your problem is just with kind of fundamentalist witchcraft. The reality is that witchcraft is far more nuanced than that, and there's no conflict between science and witchcraft. I mean, science deals with physical law and physical causality, but witchcraft deals with potent spells and the internal connections between things. This idea that somehow we shouldn't call into question these patently bad ideas for fear of offending people, for fear of glossing over their despair, for fear of not criticizing other problems in the world. I would never argue that religion is the only problem in the world or the only source of human conflict, but it is a source, and we are mightily attached to it, emotionally attached to it. And we are loath to criticize it even when it is declaring its ugliest intentions and its ugliest certainties. The problem with the Bible is however you pick and choose, whether you're a literalist or a selective literalist, the problem is there's just a mountain of divisive nonsense in there, and that's where people get ideas about homosexuality being an abomination, and why our country in the 21st century debates gay marriage as though it were the great moral issue of our time. This is coming from religion, and it seems to me that it's time we had an honest conversation about that.
Let me